This is Spring Street. It's Prince Street and Soho. And I would hide. This is Arnold Newman, the famous photographer, came to shoot me for a magazine. He got arrested because I was hiding. And so on, California. Florence, they paid the police not to arrest me. Oh, I got arrested again, 57th Street, doing the lips. You know, so I would use the street as a piece of paper. And from above, you could see. Anyway, oh, this is later on, sleeping on a Carl Andre in Berlin, where I used the Carl Andre sculpture, you know, talking about feminism, using a very macho artist's work, very minimal, and using it as my pedestal. For me, the art. Femme Fatale, this posters of my band, Justine and the Victorian Punks, part of the street works, because I put these posters around the street. Copenhagen, the Little Mermaid. In the streets, the guards came passing by, and they were totally confused. And Florence, this is Florence, the David. There's no place like home. The 70s was a time of rebellion. There was, you know, it was post-happenings, so the happenings were foreign to me in a way. But the 80s, you know, the late 70s, I got to know a lot of artists, a lot of the conceptual artists were a lot of my friends, the big artists like Dennis Oppenheim, Bill Beckley, Roger Welch, Vito Conci, that whole group of artists I became familiar with because I showed in a gallery that showed them, even though my work was, I now see post-conceptual, because it was still very sensual work. And I actually, in a way, I reacted because I felt, even though I loved conceptual art, that it was too much about the head and not enough about what art for me still is, a visual language. That's very powerful. And also, although I was totally in agreement with Duchamp and the force of conceptual art, I still felt we should not lose the visual language in art. I knew painters, actually. Like I knew the Greenberg crew, the painters like Larry Poons and that whole group of artists. And then the conceptual artists, which I felt a little more related to, because painting didn't, I felt there should be more to it now than just painting. And I was painting the streets, so when I met the people like Robert Smithson that did earthworks, I felt very related, you know. And then after that, I left the conceptual group because I felt they never took me in. I was much younger, and I also was a woman, and that was not quite acceptable. You know, it was harder to be accepted as a woman then. And so I made friends with a new group of artists who are now, like, maybe you know some of them, Jeff Koons, Richard Prince. There was a writer named Alan Jones that brought us all together. And I was the only famous one in that group, but I felt more connected to them, and them to me, apparently, you know. And it was a very competitive little group, and as I remember being the only woman in it. But it was still, there was a lot more sharing, and I think that's what you're getting at, right? There was going out to the mud club, to the clubs, to having parties and drinking beer and fighting over women, men, you know. But it was a very exciting time for ideas to come together and artists to come together. And somehow, somewhere in the 90s, this is gone. This is really gone. You're right. Artists are much more isolated. Now I think it's gone so far off the other end in a way, and fashion entering the art world, that I'm taking the stand of withdrawing and turning my back a little bit. One is because I don't find that communication available. And two, it's because in a way my work's been a lot about commenting on contemporary culture. And in a way, so that's why I invented Justine in the late 70s, early 90s, where I became the head. I was a marketing genius, you know, I died and resurrected as an entrepreneur. Well, now it's more like I'm withdrawing and taking a stand and examining what is going on here and almost turning my back to it, but still creating, but much more in an isolated manner, and hoping to find a form again, or a way, or to talk to a larger public again in another way. I don't really think of myself as decadent, actually. Outrageous only in the way that I'm unconventional. And I hope I still am, you know. I don't want to be part of the masses. I'm interested to speak to them, but not being part of them. Even though I had already made a name for myself in the art world, people quite did not know what to do, and they called me a performance artist, which in a way I am, I've always have been, but no more or less than Joseph Beuys or Andy Warhol. But with me, they love to focus on being a performance artist, which meant probably I did not have a product to sell, and probably I was not as serious, because an entertainer is never on the same level as an artist, I think, you know, like Rembrandt or Picasso. I don't like the word feminist, but in a way I've been a very big feminist, but not, I never liked the label, because it seemed something negative about it, like against men. And I never believed this was the way to gain our power, to be against men. I think the way to gain our power is to just be in touch with what we have and expose it. So in my work was feminine, and I dared to be feminine. And this was not understood in the 70s. Right now it's much more acceptable. You know, the new feminism, women are proud to be women. And I felt this was also my contribution, that I was not afraid to show my femininity. And to be a feminist at that time was almost to deny it or go against it, which I never believed in. One of my rules of the House of Olympia, where we are now, you know, where the 70s, 80s, 90s, I went through many personas. And now I'm completing the House of Olympia, but the House of Olympia in a way is, the first rule is no money, no art, which in a way is kind of a joke, but it's serious, because an artist needs to create and needs support, and our culture does not support the artist. And too many artists have become like fashion designers, where they have financing of sorts, and then they can promote themselves on other people's ideas, and this kills the artist. Americans and they have sometimes a very prudish reaction to sex, you know, and my early work, there was a lot of nudity involved. Not so much, but enough that it created some waves. This is homage to Paul Delvaux, and this is me imitating, what do you call it, when you, I'm losing the word that's so common. Anyway, when I'm transforming another famous artist work and doing my own vision with it. So here I am in the work myself, using my body, directing it. I like to accumulate, and I like to clean up. I'm big on cleaning up, so I'm always, everything here, like a critic once said, you know, on television, that when you come in here to pick a work for a show, I think it was Bill Arning who said that. He said, you never know which is art and which is not art, which is going to become art. So yes, I'm an accumulator, but I'm also like to, I'm not afraid to throw things out. Well, maybe sometimes I am. The return of the commissioned portrait. And for me, this is something I've always done, the portrait, but it's not, it's been like a secret until the early 90s. Where I did exhibitions in Munich of just portraits. And this is a portrait I just completed, and it's of Yogi, Japanese, sort of really interesting personality from that culture, and very cosmopolitan, somebody that travels a lot and loves tigers. So this is me transforming him into my vision. And there's a lot of theater in the portraits. This is an earlier one. This is a model of a, you know, another thing I always do is record my life in album covers. And this was a portrait I did of Caterina Otto. The original portrait is three-dimensional. And most of the portraits have an iconic kind of feeling, and more sometimes geared towards the 18th century. I didn't have that feeling with Yogi because I felt he was so much part of the Japanese culture. So this is mini portrait of Caterina. I have my own alchemy, but usually I use a lot of different materials. Usually it's like three-dimensional, and I use fabrics, objects. You know, objects come out of the portraits most often, and they come off the wall. I like the fourth dimension, I guess is what I'm looking for.